What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in again today. Today, as the title of the video states, we are going to be talking about role queue. As you know, Valve implemented role queue about a week ago, and I wanted to give my first impressions on how I think it is affecting matchmaking and the matchmaking experience. And surprisingly, there's quite a bit of good stuff to talk about. So let's just get right into it. Now, to put this in perspective, I am from Dota 1. I've been playing since the very first map ever came out. I played Warcraft 3 and then switched over to Dota as that game became very popular. And I will admit that I kind of enjoy the skill requirement to be a solo queue player in Dota, like regular Dota solo queue, because you have to have some diplomacy skills, some social skills, some communication skills. And yeah, even if you employ those to the best of your ability, sometimes you just deal with really angry people. But part of that process is something that I've kind of enjoyed recently. So I was fairly skeptical with the introduction of role queue, and I had a lot of sort of negative preconceived notions about how it would affect the game. That being said, after playing about 15 games of role queue, I am starting to be less of a skeptic and more of a supporter of what it has been doing to the game of Dota 2. So I've played about 15 games of role queue, and I've tried queuing as every single role except for mid, just because the mid and carry experience is fairly similar, and I'm not a huge mid player myself. So I want to talk about the things that I like about role queue first. Let's start with the positive. The first thing that I like about role queue is that if you pick the right role, the queue times are super fast. And that's really nice if you have limited time. You don't want to spend 15 minutes waiting for a game. So what are those roles? Off lane is easily the fastest queue time. And support obviously is close to that. But if you happen to be a player who likes both of those, then queuing role queue will probably get you faster queue times than just regular matchmaking. The next thing that I like, and this is probably the biggest point, is that the role queue experience, at least so far in my experience, is that it removes a lot of the initial stress that people experience when they queue into a game. Now, I've always kind of been a filler player, and usually I will put my icon on the lane that I would like to play, but then I've sort of developed a strategy to not tilt my team in the drafting phase, and I'll put my icon in the lane that I want to play, and then I will say, hey team, I would like to play this, but I'm also willing to play support. Let me know. And then if somebody contests me, then I will suggest that we roll for it. And then if they don't do that, then I will just, take my secondary role or support or whatever. So that's worked pretty well for me. But admittedly, that's a lot of hassle to go through just to play a game of Dota without pissing off your teammates. So I really do like the fact that in role queue, there is no fighting over lanes initially. People are queuing for the role that they want to play, and there are no 4 invokers placed mid as soon as the game loads in. So that aspect I really like. And one thing about that I think goes overlooked is that stress is really a cumulative thing. The more stressed you are, the more likely you are to be upset at mistakes and get angry in games. And that can kind of accrue over the course of playing a number of games. So maybe on game 1, you're super happy and you don't really care, but by game 5 of the day, or, even if you have a stressful job and you come home and you want to unwind and play Dota, you can't because it's a stressful experience then. So I like that it removes that initial dose of stress that literally everybody experiences just by getting into a ranked game of Dota 2, or even unranked for that matter. People still fight over roles there. So just right there, that is a big deal because you're going to have a lot less people entering the game angry because they are getting to play the role that they want to, and they're not fighting with their teammates before the game has even started, which means that you at least have some chance to build a little bit of communication and teamwork with your teammates. It doesn't guarantee you that you're going to have a fully coordinated, well-orchestrated plan in-game, but it does mean that at the very, very least, you are not fighting with your teammates before the game has even begun. Next thing that I really like about role queue is that it allows people who want to practice something the ability to reliably practice that, whether that be roles or heroes. So I think that kind of will allow people to maybe progress a little bit better at the parts of the game that they want to get better at. And obviously that's a really good thing for Dota because it's a hard game to practice and to practice efficiently. So even just a little bit of change where people are able to get a little bit better at things they want to get better at means that the whole like skill base of the player base will increase over time. The next thing that I like about role queue is that it gives a hint to all players that Dota is a team game, in fact. And I like this because obviously in solo queue, the overarching theme, the status quo has been that I need to 1v9. I need to 1v5 the other team. It's solo queue for a reason. It's all about me against the enemy team. And while that is still kind of true, like you do need to perform, at the very least, role queue institutes a structure in which people can see, oh, okay, well, there are defined roles, and I'm playing this role, so maybe I should have some specific ideas about how this role should be played. And over time, people will, again, kind of learn that this teamwork is part of the game of Dota 2, and they should probably focus on that to some extent. And the final thing I wanted to talk about is that role queue, at the very least, even if you don't agree with anything I've said so far, role queue gives people a little bit less, just a little bit less to complain about. And I think that's good for the game in general. So I've been doing a lot of loving on role queue in this video, so let's talk about a few things that I do dislike about it. And the first of those is that Dota is a game that requires you to be adaptable and versatile. And that is the core, that's one of the core concepts of the game. And I think that role queue encourages or could encourage some people to be less versatile. And so if somebody is only playing offlane, they're only playing mid, they might not have a good understanding of what the other roles do because now they can have the excuse of only playing one role over and over and over and over again. And trust me, there's some good experiences to have. Like if you're in a game and you get stuck playing a role that you're not used to and you realize just how hard that role is, then that can kind of put things into perspective and help you understand that when your teammates make mistakes in those roles, that, you know, they're not trying to make those mistakes. Those roles are hard because you've experienced it. You've experienced feeding in the offlane. You've experienced having 0 items and no impact as a support. That stuff's not fun, but when you do experience that, it helps you kind of grow as a player because you realize that there's a whole lot more to the game than just playing carry and hitting creeps and ending the game. The next thing that I don't really like about role queue is that it removes a little bit of the creativity from the game. I feel like people will start to be a little bit more rigid with perhaps their picks, but I do believe that what makes Dota so great is that there is just basically an infinite amount of creativity with which you can approach the game. So I hope that role queue doesn't sort of snuff that out or lower the amount of creativity that people are putting into solving the game. The next thing that I don't like about role queue is that it can still be abused. The system can still be abused. People can still pick whatever they want. You can still have a support that just jungles all game. That's possible. People can still pick a Shadow Fiend and just say, hey, I'm supporting, but I'm actually just going to go mid and try to contest you for last hits. There doesn't really appear to be any way that that is being averted in the system. I don't really know how they would necessarily, but it is still abusable, and so I just wanted to mention that. The next point, and this is probably the most important point, is that it doesn't address the problem of toxicity directly. And while it does foster a more positive way to play the game, to start the game, it still doesn't replace the fact that people can be toxic in games. I mean, you're still going to get people who are like, hey, you queued for carry and you suck. You're bad. That's still going to happen. People can still feed. They can still go AFK with a Shadow Amulet. That needs to be addressed. Valve needs to implement a system that lays the smackdown on these people that are intentionally ruining games, that are destroying their items, that are buying all the wards and feeding them to the other team. That needs to be fixed. And that needs to be fixed by just not letting those people play the game anymore for at least a very long period of time, if not forever, because nobody needs that in their games. I think we can all agree on that. So in conclusion, those are my thoughts on role queue. I'm pretty happy with how the experiment is going so far. I admit that I am pleasantly surprised at my overall positive experience in role queue, but I do want you guys to keep things in perspective. You do need to still practice those skills that you had to otherwise. Good social skills, good communication, and communication is something that I don't think is emphasized enough. It's hard to be a good communicator. It's very easy to be a bad communicator, and most people just refrain from communicating, which will still foster bad coordination, missed spells, people feeding on accident. That will still happen even in role queue. That doesn't fix the fact that there is just generally bad communication in solo queue, and that is a hard problem to fix. So don't think that just because you're role queuing, you're going to get into these professional level games where everybody does their job perfectly, everybody's always in the right position, everybody's playing as a team, because you're still going to have those selfish carries, those YOLO mid players, those feeding offlaners, and those bad supports who sit in lane, soak your experience, and totally ruin the game for your team. That will still all happen in role queue, so just keep that in mind, that it does not solve the core issue that causes people to be toxic in games, which is mistakes will be made, communication will be bad, and games still will be lost by players doing things incorrectly. But that's okay. That's part of Dota. That is just inherently part of the game and something we will probably always have to deal with. So that's it, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please let me know in the comment section below what your experience has been in role queue. I'd really like to know who's having positive or negative experiences and why you're having those. I think it's a really interesting new era for Dota 2 matchmaking, and I'd be curious to see whether this is sort of what Dota needs to take that next step and, elevate the community to better games and perhaps more popularity in general. All right, guys, good luck. Have fun. We'll see you next time.